In case you haven't heard, we're giving away the world's baddest Evo, TRC's 1100 horsepower Evo. Hit thatracingchannel.com. Anything you scoop off our site automatically gets you entered for a chance to win. The giveaway ends this coming Friday, August 30th at 11:59 p.m. So make sure to scoop your entries before it ends. Good luck to everybody. Let's get into the video. What's up, guys? Javier here from That Racing Channel. We're featuring Myles and his incredible 18-year journey building the world's fastest Acura Integra. You guys might know this car pretty well, but now we're diving into the man behind the build, Myles Kerr. We're so passionate about telling stories like this because really they remind us why we fell in love with cars in the first place. These stories are what fuel our passion, and we hope they inspire yours too. From everyone at TRC, we hope you enjoy this one.
I think my fascination for cars might have started off with my grandfather. My grandfather, when I was 2 years old, cut a golf club down and handed me a golf club and taught me how to play golf. Frank Bassasini, last name Bassasini. He's Italian. He liked food, like Italian food, and then he liked Cadillacs. He liked his Cadillacs. So he had like the coolest Cadillacs you could get, 97s, 8, 9, like in that era. And I just remember being in them and thinking they were super cool cars. And then actually my mom dated a guy who was a professional detailer, and he'd bring Ferraris home every other week. It's kind of all I remember. Like, I was like, man, like cars are really cool. And I didn't know a lot about them then. And when I moved to the Dominican, I feel like I guess we could all say Fast and Furious came out, but that wasn't really it. I wasn't like into the import cars. I was just like, I bought every magazine that came out every month. I'd read every article on every new car. I could tell you how fast, I could read the brochure and could tell you how fast all the cars were on paper. I used to cut all the coolest new cars out, put them all over my wall. So when I was like, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade in the Dominican, my room had like 300 pictures of cars all taped to the wall. I just remember ever since then, like I would say 7 or 8 years old, I was just interested in cars one way or another and never worked on one, didn't really know anything about them, but I was always fascinated by them, the sounds, what they did, how fast they were, even though I didn't know what fast was, so. I had been seeing a lot of cars in the Dominican, like they got a lot of Japanese cars that we didn't get a lot of here. So there was like, I think it was Nissan Priveras, Protons, I forgot the brand of it, but it was a turbo motor of some sort, and Celica GT. We kind of got on like the local paper at that point, and we found an Integra down there, oddly enough. This is, I think, 2004, if memory serves me right. And it was a GSR though, it was a 1995 GSR. Ironically enough, the same color that this car was down in the Dominican Republic. My aunt and my mom had like got some money together for me and they bought that as my first car, so I had that first car. First car, don't know anything about it. I just know that like if I floored it and I shifted second, it would like spin the tires, and it was really cool. And then one day, like I remember going around a corner and I saw like the oil light pop on. And I didn't know what that meant. Again, like we're young, right? So I think I actually ran the engine out of oil. It was a typical VTEC motor that just consumed oil, and it ran out of oil. We couldn't find any 1.8 liter GSR motors down there. And so what we found was a B16 motor, B16A2, which was out of like a 99 2000 Civic Si. So we put that into the Integra and got that back up and running. I got with a local shop there. We put that motor in it, and I just drove that thing around for quite a few years. Then I started learning about turbos and nitrous and different modifications, and so I ended up buying a nitrous kit for the car. I should note that it was the same color as this car, but it was like a poor version of it, and I actually hated the color. And we had it repainted, which was funny because obviously now this car is kind of iconic in the color of it, right? And I hated the color in 2004 or 5 when I had that car. So we actually had it painted Nighthawk Black Pearl, which was an Integra Type R color. So the first time I went to the racetrack, and it was like a night race. So you go up and like the race starts at like 8 p.m. and goes till like midnight, right? Well, we drove there, took an hour and a half to get there. I think we got there 8:30, something like that. The coolest part to me, still to this day, was the drive to the racetrack with 6 or 7 other cars, and just imagine weaving in and out of 3-lane highways, 2-lane highways with all your friends in a place where nobody's chasing you, going 110, 15, 20 miles an hour roughly the whole way there in the areas you could go that fast. And it was just a lot of fun. So like that first experience was pretty awesome. If you've ever been to like any race that has a big Latin culture there, like Latin American culture, Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, the passion for racing is just different. And they didn't care what car was going down the track. They were yelling back and forth on which car is gonna win. And just the sheer cheering and the happiness and everything, they don't know anything about the cars they're watching go down the track, right? But they're like yelling up and down for the car to win. And I still miss that part. Like every time I go back to Maryland for those races, I get like a very similar feel and vibe from that, and I really miss that part. And that was something in the Dominican that like was the coolest thing, is like you come back around, kids are coming up to talk to you about your car that like don't know anything about it, but they just want to know, does it have nitrous in it? Tiene nitro, and like asking questions, and like it was fun, it was cool, you know. And if you're like, you know, 16, 15, 16, 17, that's like a big deal. Like, you know, having someone interested in something you're doing was super cool.
So we're here in my garage, which doesn't look like a whole lot, but the last couple motors that have gone in and out of this car have actually all been in this garage on jack stands. Those who know what it's like working on a car on jack stands, the struggle, I know it all so well. It was kind of cool. This is my box of time slips from a long time ago, and is some as early as 2021 in here, but there's a ton of time slips in this thing. August 25th, 2006, right here. So the first week I bought this car, 1304C, 16.5 at 86. And that's pretty cool actually. So I keep this box here just for old cool memorabilia and stuff to look at. It's kind of like a time lapse. It's like, you know, here I went back to June 22nd, 2008, 13/0/115. So
I don't remember the exact year. I want to say 2005 or sometime. Something happened to the old motor. I got with another guy down there. So the guys that I had that were my friends wherever were super awesome guys. And then I met another gentleman who had a fast Civic also, who then had a buddy who was working on his car. Every time I'd go to the racetrack, I'd find the guys who had the fastest Hondas out there. And there was two guys. There was a gentleman named Shasky Tavares, which I think he still actually does a lot of racing down in the Dominican. And there was another guy named Peluca. And so he was the tuner and Shasky was the guy who built the car. So we ended up taking my car to him, and they ended up building the motor, doing a rod and piston motor. I don't know what it ran, but it felt really good for what I had before. And I was supposed to end up, you know, going to them, getting it tuned, going through this whole process. And I basically moved away in 2006, so I had to sell the car after I just put all that money into it. And like, pretty typical, you know, you put a ton of money in a car and you sell it for pennies on the dollar. I think I sold the car for $5,500 to a buddy of mine down there, and then we moved to the state of Washington in 2006. I moved here, I was 18. I didn't know a single soul. I started a job at a place called Steve's Auto Restorations, and August of 2006, I ended up buying this car, which I should have got it. I have the original broker sheet, and I have all of that actually, still from when I bought this car. So I bought this car for $6,000 from a gentleman who had 5 or 6 Integras at the time. The first thing I did with the car is I took it to the track. And I found out that Portland International Raceway has a Friday, Saturday late night drags. So the first drag I ever went to, it just happened to be, I mean, this was the early 2000s, 2006. So there was seemingly a lot of people racing back then, I think the cars are faster now, but there was a lot more racing back then, like slower cars and people going to the track. But I remember going to PIR and being stuck 1.5 miles away from the entrance, waiting to get into the track because they had an event called I think it was Street Wars or something. I think the car ran a 16.4 at 87 miles an hour, completely stock. That was pretty much the end of the racing side, because here in the Northwest, after about September, you don't get good enough days, so they kind of closed the track and I didn't race. But then 2007, I went, the minute that track opened, because I didn't know anybody, I didn't know where to go. The forums were kind of just starting. Facebook, MySpace was a thing. So I had a MySpace profile, and then I started meeting people on northweststreetracing.com, which was a forum back then. And the first year that I owned this car, I had over 350 passes down the quarter mile on it. I just raced the car as much as I could. And I kept doing little mods to it. Like I did the intake, cool. I did some max speed coilovers, which were just like the cheap version of your coilovers you put on the car. I put those on it, so it lowered the car a little bit. Then I think I remember buying an intake manifold, buying an exhaust, a header. So my 16.3 went to as fast as a 14.7 with all just bolt-ons. I think I remember getting on like online, and this was the dial-up days. And I remember finding a place called Honda Tech. I signed up for Honda Tech, I think it was a February 2nd, 26th, 2004. So 20 years ago, I signed up on Honda Tech, and it's like you have to come up with a name. I was an oddball out in the Dominican Republic. You're called Gringo in every Latin, if you're a white guy showing up in any Latin country, they pretty much call you Gringo. Everyone called me Gringo, so I was like, okay, Gringo. I thought about it and I was like, well, I've got an Integra, so how about Gringotegra? And lo and behold, that was the name I created on Honda Tech, and I was really active on there a lot. I was active on the local forums here when the first thread that I posted on my Honda Tech was my car was stolen. This car was stolen in 2007 actually. It wasn't 2008, it was 2007. I went to the mall, the local mall here, and so I walked out and my car was gone. I kind of knew that like I'd probably never get it back. It was a Sunday. It was like October 29, 2007, I believe. You know, Tuesday comes and I get a call from the Clark County PD and they're like, hey, we found your car. And the first thing I said was, in how many pieces? He goes, well, it's not drivable. I was like, well, it doesn't really answer my questions. And I was like, is the motor still there? Oh yeah, the motor's still there. And I'm like, oh sweet, like my motor's still here. So like I was a little more excited. And so they had the car towed to a body shop. Insurance ended up totaling out the car. I ended up getting like $6,500 back from insurance. And I bought the car back from insurance for $243. So I think I paid English $1,500, $2,000 to put the car back together, new steering column. There was just a lot of labor because like they had ripped almost everything off the car to about right here. So the bumper was off, the radiator was out, transmission, half the stuff was unbolted, the intake manifold was all bolted. Like it's like they started to part the car out, but then stopped. I found out like a couple years later that I met somebody at the track who must have liked me. They told me that someone got a hold of them about they've got a car they just found, or they just stole, and it was hot. He's like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that car. He's like, also you should let that car go. At some point I made an impression on someone and he told that guy to let the car go, and the guy's like, man, I just got this car. He's like, I don't care what you just did, let that car go. At the time, I didn't know him at all. He's one of my really good friends now. I found out the whole story behind it and I'm like, that's crazy. Like, never would have thought that would happen. So I took that $5,000 I had left, or $4,500 I had left. I bought myself a turbo kit, started down that path. And so bolted the turbo kit on one weekend with my coworker Todd at the time, took it up to English Racing. And I think it was an AFI turbo kit with a 57 trim turbo. And so it ended up making, I think, 287 at like 7.5 pounds on pump gas. And I ran, I think, a 12.8 at like 111, 113. And that was the start of the turbo Integra. This car back in 2007 or 2008 actually, right, we just kept pushing the limit of this car, and then one of the other guys here, TJ and Kevin, they were also big Honda guys and they were pushing their cars too. So it was like, we'd push theirs a little hard and then I'd go, and then we'd see, he's like, all right, well, let's try a little further on yours. Cause like, you know, stock Hondas, you never really thought that you'd have a ton of power in them, right? So we just kept slowly pushing. So then I came back and then we put a boost controller on the car and ended up making somewhere in the range of 370, 350, 360 on pump gas. And that was about the highest I ever went until ethanol was available. Then switched to ethanol and I made 380, almost 400 wheel. And I think it was 2009, I ended up buying a daily driver finally. So then like this car went straight to 440 wheel. I think I ended up running an 11.3 at 126 in like 2008 or 9. That stock motor went a long time. And it ended up being a really fast car for that era for sure. And like, I remember looking on YouTube and seeing like the CFT Integra and the CFT Civic, like Central Florida Turbo. Like, I don't know if they're around anymore, but those cars back then were like my inspiration. Like, I remember this black Integra that would just destroyed this Viper on the freeway in Florida, just yanked him. And I'm like, man, I want to be like that someday. you know, a front wheel drive car, when you're making 450 wheel, like that's a pretty fast car, to be honest. Like if you could get it to hook, which I had Honda and I had an AVCR, so I would change the boost by gear on the fly. I spent a lot of time on the car on the street getting it to hook the best I could. So, you know, everyone that was faster, had more power than me, couldn't put the power down, so they were actually slower. That was kind of the end of the stock motors and stuff. So I ended up buying a motor, maybe from TJ, but this was a rod and piston stock sleeve motor. ETS made me a forward-facing manifold, and I switched to a 6262, because the 6266 didn't exist in 2009, 2010 when this happened. Then I think I made 550 or 60 wheel, or 530, 540 wheel. That motor was good. I never had an issue with that motor. That stock sleeve motor, I ended up selling it to a buddy. And I bought a sleeve motor from a buddy of mine. So then I was like, all right, a sleeve motor, get some bigger injectors in this thing, get bigger fuel system in it, try and make a little more power. I think I ended up making like 630 wheel at one point. That's when the HPF horsepower freaks, they were building turbo kits for E46 M3s and stuff. If you were around in 2008, 9, 10, 11, you probably have come across those cars. They were, I mean, E46 M3 to today is still a really nice car, and not many people ever turboed those cars, but Horsepower Freaks was kind of the innovators of doing them in the beginning. I would just talk mad shit to every one of those cars. I literally went on beamerforums.com and would just talk shit about how they're slow. Again, my car made like 600 something wheel. It was 2,800 pounds. Like, it was a fast car. It was 143 or 4 mile an hour trap car in the quarter, right? And so it got to the point where like the owner of the company called me one day, left a voicemail on my phone, and said that, you know, he could sue me for slander because I'm talking all this shit about his cars and all this negative activity and all this stuff, and how he wanted to meet me and wanted to meet up with me because he felt that I was making his life miserable somehow. So all of that happened, and they had a dyno day. So at this point they had different horsepower. They had HPF stage 1, stage 2, stage 2.5, stage 3, 4, and 5. And they had a HPF stage 5, which was a 76, 75 built motor, methanol injection, all this stuff, made 1100 wheel, like supposedly the fastest thing in the world, but had a power band that was like this big. So it was actually a slow car. It was not fast. It trapped like 138 in the quarter. So I'm like, I can beat this car. So I showed up to the dyno day, and he took me off to the side, and he's like, you know, I think we should race. He's like, I'm gonna give you a chance, we should race. And he's like, I don't think it's gonna be good for you, but we should race, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I would go to the track every weekend, and I would see how fast every car, and like, I would know what every car ran and how fast they were. So trust me, I went to the track, I saw how fast the car was. I'm like, yeah, it's not gonna win, but whatever, we'll let it happen. So he was so cocky that he thought that like he was gonna win. And even his two techs that worked for him, which I'm still friends with them today, they're like, don't race Myles, that car's gonna beat you. And of course, he's got like 6 GoPros all over the car. There's every angle that we could possibly have racing this guy. And as soon as I shifted fourth, I just started to pull away from him. And then at that time, I wouldn't shift 5th and race. I would just shift 2nd to 3rd, and then the 4th, and then I'd end at like 140 miles an hour in 4th, and that would be the end of the race. At 150, if like someone's pulling, like they're gonna keep pulling. So I wouldn't shift 5th. So as soon as I started pulling on him, that was the end of 4th gear, I'd let go. I'd stop, I'd hit the brakes. Video comes out, and he messaged me, he's like, I guess you did pull a little bit up top, and like, you know, made a bunch of excuses in the video, how he had a passenger in the car and he's gonna get rid of the passenger and all this stuff was gonna happen, and we never raced again. And Horsepower Freaks, I think, went bankrupt not long after that. But that was that was a big race back then that like everyone's like, yeah, don't f with that car. Probably a year or two after, not far after, we went down to a shift sector race in 2013. I think it was October of 2013 or September. ETS had built the silver GTR, and Luke tuned it, or actually it was gray GTR back then, not the silver one, the gray one. And it made like 1,300 horse in like 2013. I went down, we took the 2 cars down, and I remember like someone calling my car a jalopy. Like, what's this jalopy doing here, right? This is like back then, and this is like 2013. It was 2013, so Luke was the first car to go 200.5 mile at a shift sector event, like one of the first cars. So like that car goes like 203, and then I come out and go 163 miles an hour, and they're like, what the heck was that? Like, did that car just go 163 miles an hour? Like, they couldn't believe it. It was like a big deal. I ended up going 173, I believe, the first event I ever went to. 168 or 165 and then 173. And that was like unheard of. And if it means anything, a Bugatti Veyron will go 173 in the half mile. That's a $1 million+ car back then, and 170 miles an hour in anything in that event was like, what is that? Like, that's crazy. After they called it, someone called it a jalopy, they were like, you know, they came and apologized like, hey, like, I'm sorry, I realized I called your car a jalopy, but that thing's badass and fast, like fast. That was kind of the start of the half mile, end of 2013. End of 2013, beginning of 14, we picked up a customer, which his name is Austin. We'll get into who he was in the end. He was the originator of leased locators. And so we picked him up and he wanted 1,100, he wanted 1,000 horsepower Evo. And we'd made that power before. And this is obviously the 3 or 4 years after I've been working here. We built this really awesome Evo that made 1,100 wheel, and we went to TX2K 14. So I took my car there. At that time, it made 750, 800 wheel, I believe. And I still remember to this day, like after I did a couple passes down the roll, people came up to me and they're like, how do you get this car to hook? It was like Chris Miller and Tony Paulo, like, what have you done to get this thing to work so well? Because most people go straight to drag racing. They don't try to make a car really work on the street, because it's like, well, I get it, right? So I was always trying to make this car work on the street. And so I'm like, well, I just followed what you guys did in the drag racing and put it onto a Honda. And I just remember that, because like, you know, those were two people that were like, I looked up to a lot in the drag racing Honda world. I mean, Tony was the first guy to ever go 8s in a sport front wheel drive Honda back in 2008 or 9 or something like that. So like, I followed that guy from day one and saw when he'd make posts on Honda Tech, and like follow this guy, and now like I consider him someone I can talk to all the time. So like back then it was like crazy. Like, and then Chris Miller, both of those guys were like the two fastest Hondas at the time. I remember going to the Hennessy thing and like everyone's crowding up around this car like, yo, like you beat that Corvette, and like we've never seen the Hondas do anything at any of these races. And that was like the first roll race event I ever did. So I didn't really care about drag racing anymore. Roll racing and half mile were like the things I wanted to do. And so it was always like, how can I make the car faster in the half mile? And I just went down that rabbit hole of wanting to go faster. You know, my next step was like, how do I go 190 and like 195 and 200? Like when I first started the half mile, I didn't think 200 was ever something I was gonna do. You know, I did the front splitter, did a whole under tray on the car, like a flat bottom, like I did all these things. And when you have air come in the engine or in the front with a big intercooler, it has to find its way to go somewhere. And if you cover everything on the bottom so it can't escape, it's gonna find its way out. Well, it ended up like blowing the entire under tray off the bottom of the car at 180 miles an hour. So I cut a hole in the hood at the time. I literally took a cutoff wheel, put a square hole in the hood, and put some tape on the front that created a little wicker bill. So what actually happens is this has a little bulb in the hood, and as air comes over it, not only is the air coming in here, but as air goes over, it creates like a vortex out, and it actually sucks the air out. It creates like a Venturi effect, I think. Yeah, someone will quote me. Someone will say I was wrong there, I don't know. All I know is like the car became more stable. And in 2015, I switched to a Haltech Elite. It's like the first year they ever came out with it. They had some firmware issues and some wiring issues back then, and it was again a very new ECU, so I got rid of that. And this is again the time where lease locators kind of came in, Austin, and you know, he ended up wanting to sponsor the car, but I needed to put a lease locator sticker on the car. And so 2015, I had a lease locator sticker on the car. I went to TX2K again, and this was the first year it was at Royal Purple at the time, or Houston Raceway. The car was going in the roll race, I think 165, 170, and like the fastest cars were going 190. There was a lot of GTRs, and we had built Austin's GTR at the time, Austin's Evo, and then he ended up helping a lot, you know, helping me go to these events. He'd pay Luke to transport my car. He would help me out where he could, and he paid for some of the stuff. So in a way, like he helped me get the car faster. This guy was like a really good friend of ours. We felt like we had no clue what was going on at the time. We started getting a good idea of there's like some stuff was going on. He had hired one of my friends at the time, Atif, to go work for him. So Atif went down to Dallas, worked for him, and then he realized that something wasn't right, so he would drive around all these addresses that were on Austin's thing, and he would go there and like, this place doesn't exist, like this isn't a real place. And at this point, we kind of knew that something wasn't right. There were always weird things going on. And I remember being here at English Racing one day, And some guy walks in the door. I can't remember his name, but he's like, blah, blah, and blah, blah, I'm from Australia, and I'm here to meet Austin. And I'm like, I kind of look around, I look behind, and I'm like, Austin's never even been to English Racing. Like he's never been to the shop. We've always just done work with him through WhatsApp, and like we deliver the cars, he pays the bills, we show up, you know? I didn't know what was going on. Like I messaged Austin, I was like, hey, this guy's here to meet you, and like, what do you want me to tell him? And he's like, oh, don't worry about it, I'll deal with it. And so then I'm like asking the guy, like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, I bought this from him, that from him. I just, you know, I want to see it all. And I'm like, all that stuff's in his car over there. And he hasn't told me anything that you've said. I don't know what Austin's told you, but maybe you need to talk to him. He flew down to Dallas, met Austin. Austin had some deal with Lamborghini Dallas that he could just go pull an Aventador and he could drive it around. And the guy's like, yeah, Austin's gonna take care of me, do this and like that. And it's like, at this time, it was like, all right, this is now the second person who said they bought something from Austin and he hasn't delivered or told us or said anything about it, right? So we're getting to be like, at this point, I think Luke got a hold of his attorney and started going down the route of like legal action and that. And then like my customer in China was like, hey, I can't wait any longer. I'm gonna go post about this. 10 minutes into this, 30 responses of everyone who talked about all the things they had bought from Austin too, that like didn't exist. And we're like, whoa, this like turned into be big. Like Luke went and posted on there, and like that was kind of the end of Austin was like, you guys shouldn't have posted that. And we're like, well, we don't know where we stand right now. After Luke's thing, this and that, and he's like, well, I'm gonna come get my cars. And I'm like, yeah, your cars are all apart and broken right now. And like, we just took cars apart. The white GTR did have a motor problem after the last event. He still owed us some money. So, you know, we had to figure out what was going on with it. The cars weren't actually in his name either. They were in his brother's name. We went down the legal lawsuit, and Luke went down that aspect, going down the route of legal action, and ended up winning the lawsuit in the end because I think Austin defaulted on it. Meanwhile, the bank's calling us, asking us about these GTRs because there was still $180,000 owed on 2 GTRs. We told them that customer owes us X amount of money, he can't pay, so we're putting a lien on these cars. And then of course they're like, well, we're gonna sue you guys for it. And so we're like, well, what do we gotta do to get out of this? And so they're like, you can buy the loan off from us. So we bought the 2 GTRs for $45,000 each, so $90,000. They wiped their hands from it. So then we started parting out the cars. We did what we can to recoup some money because we were 50, 60 grand in attorney fees, plus Luke lost 250,000 in the investment he had made. You can get online right now and type in lease locator scam, and there's like 30 pages that show up. Like Speed Society did an entire article on the whole thing. GTR Life has all this stuff. Like you can still find today information on that stuff. And then we never actually heard from him again. Like the last message that he had said is like, you guys just made a big mistake posting what you did. And I'm like, well, I don't know what you want us to do. Like, we need to get our money back and what Luke's invested with you that's now disappeared. And at this time we had 4, 5, 6 different people get a hold of us telling us that they've invested money. And then even when the lease locators thing came out on Speed Society, we had someone message us that was taken from Austin 7 years prior to this. So this was like a thing that this guy does every 7 or 8 years. He goes where he can, does Ponzi scheme, whatever he did. And I think a lot of people underestimate how small the aftermarket car world is in the import world. And that was the problem. He scammed too many car guys, and car guys talk, and that's what started the post online. Again, we got to build really cool cars, went really fast, stuff was really cool, but it was kind of a bit of a shit show behind the scenes that we didn't know was going on. So it was kind of crazy though, yeah. So the beginning of 16, I got a Motec, I got a dog box, I got a dash, which happened to be Austin's dash out of his Evo. So that all went into my car. Not the Motec, but I bought the Motec M130. John Reed Racing did his first Honda B-Series package. Other than Austin's GTR, this was the first Motec M1 car that we had touched. I went to TX2K 16 and I made 946 wheel. And I believe the coolest, one of the best races I had was I yarded this red UGR 6-speed R8. I believe I had a 6466 then, so then I put a 6870 on the car. And this was 2016. I went to Colorado and I only went 190 again. And I didn't know why. It was a very humid, hot day. The car didn't go any faster. I was super bummed. I was pissed. Like, I was like, let's car should have gone faster. And the next event was shift sector in Oregon, which was the last time Oregon had a shift sector, a half-mile race. And I ended up driving the car down to Salem, Oregon, which is about an hour and a half away from here. We stayed at a hotel that night. The next morning, on the way to McMinnville, where the half mile was, I did a 2-3 rip on the street. Coolant blew out the front of the car, all screwed up, just blew a head gasket, and literally parked in a cemetery. I pulled off the side of the road and I'm literally in a cemetery with the car broken. AAA got the car back. I brought the car to the shop over there, got the car back up and running, 1 in the morning, whatever. Drove it down to Salem. First pass the next morning, the car goes 198.23. I'm coming back around, I didn't know how fast the car had gone. It was one of those moments where everything just worked and happened, and totally getting emotional now. And I remember just crying in tears because I just spent that whole day going through that whole procedure, that whole getting the car back together, and then literally shatter my record by 8 miles an hour, and extremely excited, and went 198. I was we're gonna go 200 today. Next pass, brakes and axle on the 1-2 shift, so I put a new axle in it, and the next pass it torches the head. So whatever was going on in the motor was definitely something that was unhappy, which is why it blew a head gasket initially. And I don't believe it had an O-ring cylinder head at the time. It didn't have any of that. So then it blew that. And for 2017, I came up with the goal of I want to go 200 in the quarter and the half. I went 198, 200 should be easy, right? That's what you think. That ended up happening in 2017, actually, in Colorado. Same transmission, same motor. Slightly different motor, sorry, we built a different motor, another sleeve motor, 84 mil GSR. ETS redid the entire turbo kit for me. So the current turbo kit, the manifold and everything that's on it right now has been on this car since 2017. It's the same one, and I did a 72, 75, went through the whole new thing, and then went to Colorado, and I believe I was racing Morris Malone in his red Corvette, and I think my first pass, it went 203 or 4 or something, and I went 200. So that was cool. So then I just was well, how much faster can I keep going? And it really kind of got to the point of this traction was the problem. 2018 and 19, they had these events at Shift Sector that Motivicity, which used to be a distributor, they put on called the Never Lift Half Mile. I think I went 204 and then 207, so that was faster. I think the first weekend I raced the car, I went 200, I went 208, and I went 207 in Coalinga, which was unheard of. I think I won $5,000 that weekend from Never Lift because they had 2 days of racing. So I did that, and it wasn't until 2019 that I went faster than that. June of 2019 is when I finally went over 210 in the half mile with the Integra front wheel drive. That was the same time where UGR had a couple cars in the 250 range. We had a customer that went 244 in the half. We had another customer in 232 in the half in his GTR. And here I am with this Integra trying to go 210. My goal was 210, and I went 213.98. 2018, I started racing the Evo 10 actually. August 26th or 7th of 2018, we were trying to get the Evo 8 to go 7s. We were obviously had the Evo 10, and it's a sponsored car from GSC, ETS, and Exity at the time was a big sponsor. So, we were kind of committed, and we're well, Luke's I can't drive 2 cars. He's who do we have drive it? And I'd never ran, this car ran 9s in the quarter, but it'd never been 8s or anything. So, and I'd never driven an all-wheel drive car on the track either. So first event I went to with the car, first pass ever in the car, I went a 9.3 at 160. And that's my first time ever racing the Evo 10. And that was kind of the beginning of racing that car too. Luke had been at an 830, I believe. At 170 miles an hour was the record in the Evo 10 at the time. And the first event I went to racing the car event, World Cup Finals in 2018, it went 827, 829, then 827. And so then I now had the record racing the Evo 10 at 173 or 4 miles an hour. So TX2K 2019, I think we ended up going from a 827 to an 816 at 183. And actually I raced Aaron Lopez in the semifinals in the six shift elite class. He just tattooed me off the tree. He ran like 8.6 and I ran 8.16. And it was like, whoa, we went from an 8.20 to an 8.16. Like, whoa, we got the car, you know, a little faster. There wasn't even another there was maybe another 880, 870 car, Evo 10, Matt Galliano at the time. He was the only other person that had been anywhere near us. And then out of nowhere, he runs an 815 with a 3 at like 177 miles an hour at the DSM shootout in August. And we were like, whoa, like the first time someone's faster than us in the car that we've been pushing, paving the way this whole time. We had already spent about a month taking weight out of that car because we ran 816. What do we got to go to do sevens now? We got about 180 pounds, 150 pounds out of the car. I lost like 25 pounds. The car then became just a different car. Like it was just a nasty car. In retrospect, Luke had the car set up very well. Him doing the tuning, me doing the driving, we could kind of talk back and forth, when before it was just one person. So I would give my insight, he would give insight, and we'd kind of come up with a conclusion on what we're gonna do. We changed the suspension, we did clutches, we did all stuff, and then we showed up to, we went to World Cup Finals 2019. You know, we were there to set the record. We were there to try and beat the 815. It was crazy. I think I ran an 821, an 818, an 817, and an 815 with a 9. Galliano at the time had gone at 8:15 with a 3, so he was still quicker than us, and we didn't have the record. So we stayed for the test and tune on Monday. The first pass out, the car went at 8:29 at 187 miles an hour, which was fastest mile an hour it ever been. It came out with like a 163 60 foot, it was horrible 60 foot, but we're like, this car is gonna go fast today. Boom, next pass, come back out, runs an 803 at 188 miles an hour. So we got the record back, we had the mile an hour, we're like, we're gonna do it. At the end of that pass, I started noticing on the dash that it's getting hot at the end of the track, and I see kind of steam coming out, so I shut the car off. I tell the guys, hey, come back around. So it turns out it cracked the port on one of the cylinder heads, lost all the water in the car, in the engine. So then we're like, well, we just went 803, I bet we could go sevens. So we thought. So what we did is we emptied all the water out of the car, took the radiator out, took the nitrous kit out, lost a bunch of weight out of the car. Next pass, 801.
Come on, bitch, do this. Oh, my God!
We ended 2019 with a car that went 8.0 in the beginning of 2020, which was also COVID year. We went to TX2K again. We went to TX2K with the goal of running sevens. TX2K got shut down early, so we got a whole day early. So Saturday night, like at this time, we had already I ran an 8.001. Literally the last pass of TX2K, Luke's like, hey, this thing's gonna be a little spicier here. He's like, I added like 3 degrees more timing where the thing falls. And at this point, like we changed the differential, we changed the TK, so we'd broken a bunch of stuff, right? I was racing this red Supra. He like launched on me. I just wanted to make sure the thing came out, kind of bounced a little bit, shifted into second gear. The thing just felt nasty in second, and shifted third, shifted fourth, and I'm like holding on, and I'm like, that had to have been it. Like it had to have been. I could see on the board, I saw 7. That's all I saw. I just started yelling, like I knew he didn't. Came back around, drove the car down. Everyone's yelling, like we were the first to go sevens in the Evo 10 ever. And so the next day we took a picture with the Evo 10. So JR, the owner of ETS, he was there. Lucas was there and I was there. So JR was the first in an Evo 10 to run 9s ever in the world. Lucas was the first to run 8s and I was first to run 7s, and all 3 of us were there. So the same car, all different setups over the years, all different ones, and here we are, you know, we had pushed the car to the 7s. So then COVID kind of happened and no racing happened the rest of 2020, so we didn't go to World Cup until I think 2021. So 2021, we raced it in Texas. I actually made it to the finals in the 6-shift class in the Evo 10. And like, I didn't think I'd make it that far, right? Like I never thought that would happen. It had an old turbo on it, and it was like a 4-year-old turbo. Right when I shifted 5th in that car, the turbo goes zoom, and that guy drove right by me, like right at the 1,200 foot mark. And so I took 2nd place, and I was okay. Like I was like, we'd never been in the finals in any car we'd ever raced. Like English racing, like no Evo ever makes it to the finals in a race, right? Like it's very rare in a stick shift race or anything that car made it. So at World Cup finals, that thing ended up going 776 at 189 and a highest mile an hour of 192.4 or 5. And at that time, for about 6 months, the Evo 10 was the fastest Evo in the world in the quarter mile. No other Evo had trapped over 191. And we took the car that they say is not the Evo and ran that. And that was 2022, which also was the same year that I converted this car to all-wheel drive. 2021, the car was all-wheel drive. 2022 was the first year that I competitively raced this car. 2022, got a PBG transmission in the car with a tall fourth gear and a normal fourth gear. And this car ended up going 202 in the roll. And when that happened, I was racing a gentleman from Boost Logic. His name was Heath. We took off and I just yarded him this whole time. Just kept going. And just at the end of that, I went 202. It was like such a cool experience to take him out. The half mile wasn't really a thing anymore. Like it's just, that was kind of the end of the half mile because I don't have a transmission that's geared correctly for it. And so I started drag racing the car again. Sometime in June of 2022, I got contacted by Jared Holt. And he says, hey, I'm putting together a team. He had asked me if ETS wanted to go, and I'm like, I'll ask them. And then so I find, because he said he's got a Street Outlaws event that he's going to, and he's trying to put together the fast imports. So I asked him, like, well, what are you looking for? I'm like, is this like an event that you think I can do? And he's like, well, yeah, that'd be awesome. So then I'm like, okay, so I got to do everything I can to get this car, because I haven't really been drag racing the car. So Kevin and I took the trip to Oklahoma, did some testing on the street down there one night. The car did really good. And then we met with our other local people who were meeting there that night. And it was obvious that Lopez and I had the two fastest cars in our group, like by far. Like any road we put them on, the cars just launched and it was like, okay, like those things are fast. So we then showed up to Street Outlaws, met all those guys, and it was a super cool experience. All those guys are honestly super cool. Like they're not what you expect either, but they were honestly really good guys. We get into the whole like who's racing who, and like the arguing back and forth was just going, so I'm like, this is just dumb. And someone's like, I'll race you. And I'm like, I put my hand out, like didn't realize that I committed to a race that I wasn't necessarily supposed to commit to. Me and Aaron were trying to get paired up with their fast cars. And so I got paired up with, his car wasn't slow, but I got paired up with Farm Truck, who had it's like a 630 or 620 car, apparently, I think. It was an SRT8 Jeep. So I got paired up with him. Honestly, I'd never done a flashlight race in my life. So I'm sitting there on the tree and he walks back and I remember kind of seeing a flame come out, and I remember him seeing go like this, and then I just left. He didn't activate the light. The light was the flame that I saw. And so I red lit, but I yarded him. I launched the car. The car went faster than anything that anyone had seen that night. They were like, thank God that they lost, because the car would have destroyed. There was no race. Their car was quick, but my car, there was no race for them. I tried everything I could to get another race that night, but after they saw the car, unfortunately, they were like, yeah, we ain't racing that thing again. Like, it wasn't happening. That was a super cool experience. Aaron won that night. At that point I was like, all right, this is fun. Like I'm drag racing now. So I bought Billets that year with the slicks and everything, got the slicks on it. At that time, we were signed up to go to World Cup for the Evo 10. I wasn't fast enough to qualify to race in any class that I could compete in. So I went drag racing multiple times, ended up finally running an 820, 830, 180 something miles an hour. Then we went to our local Woodburn. I went 8-0s back to back at 188 miles an hour, and that qualified me to sign up to race the car. Got enough people to help out get the car there, so took the car to World Cup Finals 2022 with the goal of running 7s in this car, and ended up actually running 7s against Fresh Straight. So Fresher and I had like a long history of racing or talking shit to each other. His car had been all-wheel drive for about a year and a half, 2 years. He had already been 760s or something. I'd never been 7s. His car is definitely like full race car. My car was definitely not as race car as his. We talked a lot of shit to each other back in probably 2017 or 18 when his car was front wheel drive and he was doing the roll races down in, I think, your guys' event. So we had this feud back and forth, but what nobody knows is we're literally talking to each other on the side. He's Cuban, he barks in the public eye, but on the backside, he's actually like a really good person. You know, we had a big feud back in the day, but it really wasn't anything bad, but we would make memes back and forth. So like I have a picture of me sitting like this, holding him as a little baby in my hands, him lining me up in the half mile, him sitting passenger seat saying number one, like I'm number one. Like we went back and forth. It was just a lot of fun, man. It was so much fun. And, but like what people don't know is we're actually good friends. Like on the backside, we're like causing all this drama. It's a lot of fun. And so we ended up like lining up in Texas or in our World Cup. And I ran my first 7 racing fresh straight in this car. The video is really cool. Like he beats me, he ran 7.7, I ran 7.8. I had a better light and I had more mile an hour. The car got there a little quicker. And actually the coolest thing is there's a video from behind on his side when I won, his wife is jumping up and down and saying, he ran 7s, he did it, and runs over to my whole crew and like hugs and everything. And so at that point I had ran 7s in this, I ran 7s in that. That weekend we ran 760s in that. I ran 780s in this, I believe, that weekend. And I was like, all right, life's complete. Like we're happy, you know? Start of 2023, all the videos that came out from Hoonigan, all that came out. Miniature, went to TX2K 23. That was double duty for this car. The first time that I wasn't racing that car and this car, but that was I did the roll race and I did the drag race in this. I did the roll race in this, I didn't win. Pulled the tranny out, put the different 4th gear in it because I needed the mile an hour for the roll race, but I needed the gear ratio for the others. So pulled the tranny, put the other 4th gear in, put the tranny back in, went drag racing. I qualified like 7th or 8th on the ladder in stick shift elite. Every race I had was a good race. The first race I had was against a Corvette. He literally pulled the wheels on me and I ran a 778 at 192, which was the highest mile an hour I'd been at the time. I ran another pass. It was against Grubworm after that. And Grubworm, he was telling me he had a clutch issue with the car. There was a problem going on with it. And so I then ended up beating him. So then I went to the semifinals, then against Joel Granis. And I just watched him beat Aaron Lopez and run a 680 at 213. And I'm like, well, I ain't gonna win this race. I get next to him, I line up, I launch, I see him go, I shift second, I see him ahead, then I shift third and I see him drop back and I'm like, oh shit, like I might actually win this race. I shift 4th and I go and I win and somehow I've won the race. I'm into the finals. I go to the finals and this Mustang that Sean Madden has, super cool guy, or not Mustang, wow, who's gonna hate me if I said that, Corvette, white Corvette, gorgeous car. I listened to it and he's like, hey, I just want you to know we're gonna send this thing down the track. This thing's got a motor problem right now. And he's like, but we're gonna send it, so just be ready. I'm like, all right. I raced my race, run a 771, 192, beat him, win TX2K Elite stick shift in this car after only really drag racing it for about a year. And that was kind of a big milestone for me. And it still is. Like winning any big race where you get a big trophy and $10,000, like that's a big deal. So that was 2023. That's the fastest I had been up until then. 2024, start of 2024, I got this billet motor in it now that Jason Mostrom gave me the billet block a couple years ago. I chucked every rod out of it. So Howard or AR Fab, they put the thing back together. So I went TX2K with a billet motor, a little more power, new cylinder head, new stuff. Precision put a new turbo on there. I go out the next pass and the thing runs. I ran against Joel Granis and I ran the 750 at 195. The car's always had the mile an hour. Like it makes a lot of power and it does work pretty well. But I didn't expect the car to be a 750 car. You know, as of right now, I've ran 760 local, like very easily. So I do think the car has 740 something in it now. And it's a very unconventional car because I have 15s all around. Everyone else runs a bunch bigger tire all around. I'm cutting very similar 60 foots. Like I've somehow made the car work. We've made the car work really well. To duplicate this car in just parts, not including any spare parts, just one time, you're about 125,000 in parts, right? This car took 18 years to get to this level. Like we talked about how the car was 100% stock and where it's at now. It took 18 years to get to this level. There's a lot of side things that I've done in the middle, but that's how long it's taken to get to this level. And it consumes about $20,000 to $30,000 a year in parts. So you could say I'm fortunate or unfortunate to be single and no kids and no wife, and I live very cheap. I don't drive a fancy car. I have a 99 CRV. I don't have a car loan, you know, so there's little things that I have that like most people, like I've chosen this car and career over a lot of stuff. So you gotta be willing to make sacrifices somewhere. That was my sacrifice, was just push this car to where I wanted to. And then English racing was a big sacrifice too. Like I work a lot of hours. So, and do it for a reason, right? If you want to do it for you. Like everything that I've always tried with this car, it's been for me. Like I've wanted to do this. It's not been a, hey, I'm trying to beat that guy. It's always been like, I'm just racing my race in this car and just trying to enjoy it. Which is also one of the reasons why I haven't turned this car into a full-on race car, because I dislike cars that you can't enjoy. And I can't enjoy a car that's fully gutted and caged and like, you can't drive it around. Like that's just not fun to me. So I never would have been able to do what I do with this car if I didn't work here. And the guys here, like we have an amazing team of all different guys, but as a team as one, like what we've accomplished and we can accomplish has gone a long way. Not just this car, but that car. Other customer cars, our Evo 8, like find me another shop that has 4 different 4-cylinder cars that have all ran 7s and they're all completely different cars. Honda, all-wheel drive, Evo, like 2 different Evos, 2 different platforms. The only people that have ran 7s in that. And we've got Jeff's old DSM Auto that went 738. This car's been 750, that car's been 7.7, the Evo 8's been 7.6. Those are 4 different motors, 4 different drivetrains, 4 completely different cars, but all have ran 7s, and that's something that's pretty rare, you know? So without the shop, Lucas, TJ, Jeff, Aaron, Jaden, Brad, Sean, Alex, like without these guys, like this car wouldn't be where it's at, and I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing. They deserve a lot of credit on all of these cars and every customer car we build. It's a big team effort, which is one of the special things about Team English Racing, is we are like a big team, and it's, you know, there's not a lot of shops out there like us. A true service shop that makes dreams come true if you can make it happen, yeah.